Hello everybody. Welcome to our group today and College 411. I wanted to start about 2 minutes early to let people kind of find us and join. I would love to get feedback today on what we're going to talk about. So I hope everybody's having a great Sunday, beginning of your afternoon, last day of the weekend. And what I'd like to talk about is college entrance exams, the ACT and the SAT, and how they predict certain scores. So, um, let's just get some people talking about that and thinking about that. My first question to you is I'd love to know who is working with high schoolers. So, who's working with high schoolers in this group? So, that would be great to know. This live is basically designed to talk with teachers as well as parents to give you an idea of the scores, college readiness, why our students are taking these college ready tests, these college entrance exams. So let me just go ahead and get started. It's exactly noon. So welcome everybody. And it is Sunday morning. I was listening to a sermon this morning, and the sermon was talking about striving to be perfect. And it got me to thinking. So being perfect in your spirituality, that's one thing. But this sermon made me think about my College 411 topic today. How college entrance exam scores do and don't predict college success, and how striving for those college ready scores cause anxiety in some students, how students want to be perfect. So when students strive for perfection, when should they strive for perfection, and when is one's very best perfect, absolutely perfect for them? So listening to that sermon with my teacher hat on, I don't push students for perfection. As parents and as teachers, when do we push? And when do we say enough? I'd love to hear from you what you do about this issue in your classroom, regardless of the age of the students, or if we're talking about testing, or if we're talking about just pushing themselves for their academic success. So if you're watching, give me a shout out, kind of say, please say hi so I can see if you're watching. So let me give you a little bit of background on perfect when it comes to the college entrance exams that we use here in the United States, the ACT and the SAT. The ACT says 36 is a perfect score. Now, I had an amazing student whom I worked with for a long time in private tutoring, and he felt like a 36 was achievable for him. He felt like that was his perfect. Well, a 35 out of 36 ended up being perfect for him. By the way, the difference at University of Alabama, his dream school, was pretty huge between a 35 and a 36, and that's not usually the case. Usually once you get above a 33 you're good, but there are some really big jumps in academic merit money at some schools, and University of Alabama is one of them. But guess what? He diversified. We also studied with him for the PSAT, and he did earn National Merit Scholar, which doesn't require a perfect score. It just requires being the top 1% of your peers in your state. So he is going to Alabama and he is getting paid. So, sure, he was upset about not earning that 36 when that score came in. But after talking a little bit, he got good with it. He realized that 35 was perfect for him because he tried his best. He put his everything into it. And that's what I wanted to talk to you all about today is how do we determine what students' best is and how do we push them to their best and then let them be good with that, whatever their best is. So let me give you a little bit of background. Say hi if you are watching. A little bit of background on what these score numbers actually mean. So the top ACT score is a 36. The top SAT score is a 1600. College ready scores on these tests mean that a student has a 75% chance of earning a C or better in the corresponding college course. And we're going to get back to that and what that data means and how it does and doesn't predict college success, what those numbers really do predict. So it shows a 75% of getting a C in that class, a 50% of getting a B in that class. And those college ready scores that are a 21 on the ACT. So a 21 on the ACT says a student has a 50% chance of getting a B in the corresponding college class, a 75% chance of getting a C. That means the student is academically ready to be successful in college and has had that background. That's about 65% of the questions right. On the SAT, a score of 480 on the evidence-based reading and writing, which they combine the scores of what we would call the English part, what they call the writing part, and the reading part, and that would be a 480 out of 800. So about 65%, right? And for the math, a score of 530 out of 800 is considered college ready. So did these scores truly predict college success? No, those scores do not predict college success. A student who earned let's say a 1580 on the SAT or a 34 or 35 on the ACT might not be successful in college because they went to the wrong matched college for them, because they're exhausted, because COVID related things just made it difficult. For a variety of reasons, being academically ready for college does not mean that a student is necessarily going to be successful in college. And by the same token, a student who gets that minimum ACT score of 21 or that minimum SAT score of about 1,010 that says they're ready for college, they are academically prepared to be successful in those 101 classes their freshman year. And they could soar high above their peers who had 30s on the ACT. They're both still academically ready for college, right? It shows that they have mastered the minimum standards to be able to be successful in college. But there is so much more than just that determines your success. So that being said, let's go back to those students. Yes, it is about being prepared enough. Let's go back to those students who are so worried about their scores that they're getting anxiety and they are tying this idea of perfectionism to how they're going to do on these tests. I feel like it's very important to tamp down those expectations of perfectionism. So, if you teach high schoolers, I encourage you to just whatever you teach, even if you teach art, talk to them about the ACT and the SAT and talk to them about the idea of their personal goal score and reaching that. That's perfect for them. Very, very few students get perfect scores. In fact, I tell my students that kids who get 36s on the ACT or 1600s on the SAT, they usually do news stories about them. It's that rare. So perfect, it's not like you're aiming for 100 on a test in school, right? We are not aiming for 100. So both of the tests have scale score conversion charts. If you Google it, ACT scale score conversion chart, you should find an example of it. And you can go in and find out, all right, if my goal is a 22 in math, on the ACT, then I need to get about 32 questions right. So let's practice until we're getting those first 32 questions right because math goes from easiest to hardest. Now let's look at a student who has that 22 and they say, great, I achieved my 32 questions right in math and I want to bump it up. I can get $1,000 more a year. So they've got a goal, they've got a reason for striving for more. I'm accepted into my college with that 22. If I could get $1,000 more, or maybe I could test out of like at LSU, you can test out of your first math class with a 25 in math. So let's say the student has a 22 in math and their goal is a 25 in math. Well, that's about 8 to 10 more questions right. So we're not going to focus on perfectionism because you would have to prepare starting your freshman year and you still may not get perfect. Although preparing your freshman year just a little bit at a time is a great way to reduce that test anxiety and raise those scores. But let's say the student has their typical 6 to 12 weeks to raise that 22 to a 25. We look at that math and we say, okay, you need 8 to 10 more questions right. Let's analyze what questions are you getting wrong? Which ones can you learn and master? So that's where the perfectionism comes in, or the perfection comes in. Let's get perfect on 10 more concepts that typically are tested on that test rather than perfect according to somebody else's idea of getting them all right. So, Masha is asking, do a lot of schools do that? Could you clarify your question? Do a lot of schools do what? And if you can clarify that, I can help you. But just guessing what I think you might be talking about is, do a lot of schools um, help students? They should help. Oh, I bet you were talking about, do a lot of schools have teachers talk about the ACT? No, not that I see. It's up to the teacher. It really is. But if you just talk about it, it's like last week when we were talking about college mindset. It's great, even in middle school, junior high, even elementary school, to talk about that college mindset and to talk about the ACT, SAT score mindset. So you can talk to kids and say, look, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to figure out what your best is and what your goals are. And it's like running a race. What's perfect? There is no perfect for running a race. You finish that race, you finish that race. That's perfect, right? You may not finish it in the time that an Olympic runner would finish it, but you finish your race, that's perfect. And then you've got your own personal best. So on the ACT or the SAT, I believe that what teachers should do is encourage students to explore scholarships and entrance requirements. for at least 3 colleges. Have them do that research. Well, if you want to go to a state school, what is the minimum and what is the average? Because the average accepted score is going to be higher than the minimum score. And when I point out to my students that, hey, for you to reach your goal that you have set, you only need to answer 3 more questions right on the English and 8 more questions right on the math. They you can hear that sigh of relief and that anxiety going away. And they feel like, okay, I can prepare. And that's where teachers' encouragement, that's where your content area teachers, now let's get the math, the science, the English teachers, the social studies teachers for reading skills come into play to help students with actual strategies. They mix those strategies, the encouragement of their teachers, the encouragement of their parents, and the realization that they do not have to be perfect, and go little by little, and they can get there. I will also tell my students, do not expect to go from an ACT 22 to an ACT 28 in one test. Now, I have had students do that. I have, but I don't tell them to expect that. Tell students to expect a gain of about 2 to 3 points when they have really prepared and put their all in per test if they keep going. And then once they get their score and once they've achieved their goals, that score is not what it's about. Getting to go to a college where you can broaden your mind, where you can study things that you're interested in, where you can do your best and get internships and get into that career that you're interested in, where you can learn how to help people and then pay it forward. That's what it's all about. It's not about perfection or being automatons. And I think as teachers, we all know this, although what I want to end with, we've gone a little bit over my 15 minutes, but what I want to end with for younger teachers, teachers who haven't been in the business for very long, as well as for parents who maybe you've got your first high schooler and you haven't done this too much yet, is don't put perfectionism on yourself. Try to figure out what are your goals and how can you achieve your goals a little bit by a little bit every single day, a little bit more. And going back to the sermon that I heard this morning, give yourself, give your students, give your children a little bit of grace, because we all need grace. All right, thank you so much. And if you are watching this on a replay, please hit hashtag replay and share your comments. And I would specifically like to know, how do you talk to your students about college and the college entrance exams, and what age are they? And if you don't, how could you start? What's one thing that you could do? Let me know. Bye bye, y'all. Have a happy Sunday.